Today I'm going to talk about transgenic organisms. So what is a transgenic organism? Basically, it's just some sort of organism, whether it's a plant or animal, that has genes inserted from another organism. We're talking about cloning in a couple of days. This is different than cloning because cloned organisms have the exact same DNA as another organism. This one's, they're adding pieces of another organism into it. You may have seen those glowfish at aquariums where you got a zebra danio and they put genes from sea urchins and other aquatic animals to give them those various colors. A very common transgenic organism they do is they put the gene from fireflies in with another gene so that they can see if that other gene's been taken in, because when the baby's born, it will glow like a firefly for a while until air usually covers it. Um, We also do a lot of this with plants as well. All right, so let's take a little bit look at the vocabulary here for a minute. We talked briefly about restriction enzymes yesterday. These are enzymes that cut DNA at very specific places, um, and it's good because then you can add new pieces of DNA. Basically, when you cut it, these restriction enzymes create what's called a sticky end, which sticky end basically means the alternate bases that are over here are going to fit over here, so you can put a new chunk of DNA into that spot, glue in pieces. And when we do glue in pieces from a different organism, we've created what's called a recombinant DNA. So we've got two pieces of DNA from different sources. A very common recombinant organism we might make is we put human DNA into a bacteria. So a lot of our hormones and things like growth hormone or insulin, those things are made by taking human DNA for that insulin gene or the growth hormone gene, and we put it into a bacteria. So we just cut it open at the same spot, and we just plug in the human piece there. And then the bacteria, as it's going along, is just going to make growth hormone or insulin without, it doesn't need those proteins, so it just kind of spits it out, and we can harvest it from those bacteria. The gene that actually, or the thing that actually takes in the foreign DNA, the insulin gene or the growth hormone gene, would be something called a vector. So this is the DNA from the other source, the source that's going to kind of keep it. So it's very useful making recombinant DNAs. Generally, they're just small circular pieces of DNA because most of these vectors go into bacteria. And then we can kind of infect the bacteria with this plasmid, as it's called, once it's got that foreign DNA in it, and it'll just make more of that. And once we do that, we can also combine DNA from other organisms into higher organisms, just not bacteria, and they're referred to as genetically modified organisms, or a GMO. So these are organisms that have been genetically engineered using recombinant DNA. I find it interesting to look at most of your cereal boxes and the ingredients list. There's probably some warning that it contains a GMO product. There's a lot of them out there. So some of these that uh, we have some crops produce what's known as BT. So that's botulism toxin. So botulism is a bacterial toxin. They put it into the corn plant, and it has the generally it's produced in the leaves of the corn and things like that. So when this beetle, the corn borer, comes in there and starts eating the corn leaves, it's killed because of the botulism toxins in there. We have strawberries. The reason we can find strawberries at all times of the year is we've put an antifreeze gene. So this antifreeze gene comes from the fish, the flounder. We've taken their gene, put it in the strawberries, and now strawberries can grow longer in the season. We've also improved the quality of some of our foods by adding genes. So often rice, especially refined rice, which is nice and white, doesn't have a lot of vitamins in it. We've actually added some vitamin A gene to it. So it's produced this vitamin A rich rice. That's why it's the vitamin A. All right, and we've also created other things like we've made bacteria that can eat hydrocarbons, eat oil. So when we have oil spills, they'll just throw some of this bacteria on it and it eats it right up. And you can follow the link here and actually watch that National Geographic video for that. We can also, in theory, design babies, and they have done a little bit of this. So we can alter some of the genes, genetic makeup of a baby through in vitro fertilization. So this would be a test tube baby. So they're going to like change some of the genes or maybe look for specific genes and remove them. They haven't done too much of this, but it could possibly be. We're more likely going to find people where they take the embryos, take a gene on that, and see that, make sure certain disease forming genes aren't in that embryo before we implant. They do more of that than actually change the genes of a baby. But there are pros and cons of designer babies. Pro would be we get rid of any type of genetic disease, so the child theoretically could succeed better, increase lifespans. Um, if a parent doesn't carry a certain gene that you want the child to have, you could insert that, and we'd have a better understanding with genetics. Um, the cons of it, normally when they're doing this, they're making lots of embryos, and then they're just selecting the ones that have the gene in it. So they would get rid of the other embryos. There's certainly some moral problems with that. Um, creating a gap in society, basically, the idea behind that is that you're losing some of your variability in losing some of these bad genes. While sickle gene is bad for people, getting rid of it would certainly allow them to survive better, but people who have a sickle gene also survive malaria better. They don't have to take those anti-malarial drugs that are really bad for you. We are removing things from the gene pool by doing this. That may not be a good thing. The baby certainly doesn't have a choice of this. And we could actually lose individuality if everybody says, well, we want our baby to have blue eyes and blonde hair, and everybody else wants that too. We're going to lose a lot of the individuality of people. They all end up being the same because we're all selecting for the same genes. All right, so that's just a quick rundown of transgenic organisms and genetic modified organisms. So make sure you use these notes to answer some of those questions in that form, and hopefully things are doing well for you for the rest of the week.